Hey everyone. Today we're going to do Chapter 3, Independence and the Gains from Trade. So we're going to talk about trade here. You can think of it whether domestic trade or international, as long as there are... well, in this model it's going to be pretty simple, but you can trade with people in the same area as you, or other areas, and the more people you trade with or the further away they are, things get more complicated. If two counties or countries can both produce the same good, who should produce it? Should they trade with each other? Should they just be independent of each other, just only produce and only consume what they produce? In deciding what they should do, does it matter if one entity can produce more outright than the other? If they decide to produce one thing, what are they giving up in terms of other things they could have done with their resources? Where do the inputs for your products come from, and where does your output go? What flows in and out of your area or country? So, independence versus interdependent. So, if you're independent, maybe you're off in the frontier and you're just eating what you consume, or eating what you produce, eating what you hunt or farm, making your own clothes, etc. Sounds like a pretty challenging life to me, but in our more modern, interconnected societies, we are a bit interdependent. So, why would we trade? Well, aside from the obvious complexities of having to make your own electronics and everything, there's a lot of thought that can go into trading and what you're trading and what you're producing. So, remember we talked about the production possibility frontier in Chapter 2, where you can produce all your resources going to one item or another item or a mixture of the two. The more you have of one type of item, the less you value the next increment of that item. So one pizza, one ice cream cone, pretty good. But the 100th, not as good as the first, not as rewarding. How our trading occurs has certainly changed over time. Barriers can go up or they can come down. The mixture of trade can change. You can look up things like NAFTA, the North American Free Trade Agreement. You can look at the rhetoric that's been used here in the past decade surrounding trade and tariffs, etc., and see the complexity of these discussions. I'm going to keep on bringing several of these topics up over and over, but I'll remind you that there can be winners and losers anytime things change. So we have right here a linear PPF. You could have this convex or concave. This one's linear, so that represents a constant opportunity cost. So if you if you're Frank and you produce nothing but meat, you're going to produce 8 ounces. If you throw all your resources into potatoes, you're going to produce 32. We've got Ruby here that can produce 24 or 48. So seeing what they can produce of each good, what should they produce? Should they only consume what they produce, or should they trade? There are trade-offs for this. When factoring everything into these decisions, you're going to want to know what an individual's preferences are. How much of a good do they want? Do they enjoy producing this good? It may not factor into this model, but some people enjoy mowing yards, others don't, right? So individual preferences, while we may not discuss it much right here, they do matter. I've got an example here where diminishing marginal returns. If I eat a few grapes, I'm satisfied. After a few, I don't enjoy them so much. My kids can eat grapes in perpetuity, but I like pepperoni and they don't. So, here, let's see. Almost passed up what I shouldn't have. So after looking at each of their PPF, Ruby gets an idea and decides to talk with Frank here and says, hey, I think you should stop producing meat altogether and devote all your time to potatoes. And she does a calculation and says, you produce this much, I'll produce this much, we'll trade, and we will both be better off. He's skeptical, but the math checks out. So in this simple model, everyone wins. There are no losers, unless there's a secret third party that Ruby has been employing to produce potatoes, because they may be out of a job. But you can look this over in your own time and see that, yeah, in this example, it totally makes sense for them to specialize. One person make potatoes, one person make the protein, and for them to trade, and they both end up being better off. So if Ruby could produce with all her resources way more of both meat and potatoes than Frank, should she produce all one good or a mixture? Well, you have to think of things in terms of what each individual gives up to produce those goods, and is there a more efficient way for them to allocate resources? We're going to keep on talking about opportunity cost and this course and all your subsequent courses in economics. You're going to talk about opportunity cost. So it's what you give up to obtain something else. So absolute advantage, that's where I can produce something with fewer inputs than it takes you to produce that item. The ability to produce a good at a lower opportunity cost than another producer is a comparative advantage. So if it takes you fewer resources to produce a single potato or a single ounce of protein than another producer, you've got a lower cost there, and it may make sense for you to go ahead and produce that good even when the other party can actually produce more with their total input. But then there's an opportunity to trade. So you can see here the little matrix of how much each person can produce and what the opportunity cost is in terms of other goods. So we went through here and talked about how much each person could produce without trade and what they're giving up to produce those goods. So Ruby had been giving up half an ounce of meat for every 1 single ounce of potatoes, but Frank only had to give up 1/4 of an ounce of meat to produce potatoes. So it makes sense for him to go ahead and produce meat with all of his resources, or for Ruby to produce the protein with all of her resources, and Frank to focus on potatoes, and then trade, and they both end up being better off as long as they can trade at a value that's between their two opportunity costs. So yeah, Frank just gives up a single ounce of meat, but it can produce 4 potatoes. Ruby, giving up the same amount of meat, would have only gotten her 2 potatoes. So it makes sense for her to focus on meat and for Frank to focus on potatoes and then trade. So when they do that, you can do the math and go, okay, this leaves everyone better off specializing. And this shows why most economists are in favor of trade. Here it is, a little snippet about Adam Smith and David Ricardo. I highly recommend everyone read Adam Smith's Wealth of Nations. It was written in the late 18th century, around the time of the American Revolution. It's a cornerstone of economics. You can use Audible to listen to it while you're doing other things like exercising. I've tried to read David Ricardo's on Principles of Political Economy and Taxation. Economics can be hard to read if it was written before technological change became so important. Smith's book was an exception, but Ricardo's, I've made it 4 hours, I think, into it, out of the 14 hours it is on Audible, even on the faster speed setting. So kudos if you make it through that. Highly recommend them, though. So this goes deeper into the point and example about comparative advantage, and even if LeBron James is the fastest lawnmower on the planet, still doesn't make sense for him to mow his lawn because he can do so much more valuable activities than mowing his lawn. So going to trade and trade with other countries. So we've got imports are what we bring into the country. They're produced abroad. Exports are what we produce here and send abroad. So thinking about how we should, whether we should trade in the same terms we just discussed. And we'll talk later on the complexities of that. But if you pay any attention to the news, politics, finance, economics, business, you've probably heard discussions on tariffs and protectionism. If you look up the American system from the 1820s and 30s, this isn't the first time that these discussions have been in the news. We've gone through periods where we've torn down barriers, like in the mid-90s, but we've also gone through time periods where we've added barriers. Right now we seem to be adding barriers to trade, which, like I am going to continue to harp, there are winners and losers of this. If you want to be protectionist and you want to help a domestic industry, whether it's for national security purposes, like computing technology, AI, semiconductors, etc. There's an argument to be made for tariffs or reducing trade, protecting technology. If you want to dissuade some behaviors, like I think the current president talked about getting people to buy less toys, spending money on other items, or prop up certain industries, maybe because they contributed to you, maybe because you believe in it. The auto industry, fuel sources, etc. All these, factors can play an important role in policy decisions. But one important thing to acknowledge is that a tariff is a tax. It is raising prices. It leads to inflation. So you just have to be honest with yourself in these discussions, no matter what you decide you support. Just note that it's sort of a hidden tax. And if someone says that, the other country pays the tax, so that's not the case. Whoever's importing it pays the tax. That's how they talk about generating revenue from it. Now, as far as who the incidence of that falls upon, that can get into discussions of elasticity that we're not going to get into this chapter, and who loses more utility, or a consumer producer surplus. The depends on the price elasticity of the good, etc. So if you want to look into that, those are the kind of things you'll look at. Anyway, please go through and read through the chapter. Whether you're a stay-at-home mom or just staying at home, the chores and things you're doing around the home have value. Economists have sought to capture that value by imputing that labor. So there's a lot of good information you can find on that. And this talks about who should do chores, going back to the absolute or comparative advantage. Like, I do things like change a dirty diaper or give the kids a bath, or etc. They're kind of simple, but monotonous tasks to do, and I'll do that happily because there are other tasks that I'm not as good at as my wife, like cooking. I'm not a good cook, and she is. So anyway, all important things to think through. Again, I recommend going back and just searching some of the topics we've discussed and doing a deeper dive. Definitely reading the chapter, and let me know if you have any questions.